Hello, and welcome back to Bleach Revisited. This is Karakura Gold, here with, as always, unscripted rereading, analysis, and foreshadowing discussion for chapters of Bleach. So, in this episode, we will be reading Chapter 14 of Bleach. I'll be talking about it, talking about how it connects to the larger manga, as always. If you go ahead and check the timestamps in the description, or if you look at the chapters in the YouTube video, you should be able to jump to whatever parts interest you the most. But we will be starting with a reading, so here we go. Chapter 14, School Days. Here, take a good look. What does it say? Read it! Detective Soul? What's that? Some Hong Kong action star? It's defective. Defective. You sold her a busted soul. Jeez, cockroach. Ow! Stop fighting, you two. It's my fault. I should have disposed of it. Soul Society won't be happy if they find out. Bad for business, too. What shall we do? We have no choice. We've got to find it and neutralize it before it causes any trouble. Who knows what it'll do at large in a human body? Bleach, Chapter 14, School Days! Sweet. Feels great to finally be in a living body. I'm free at last. Those bureaucrat pigs kept me imprisoned all this time. You! What are you doing? That's that. What in the wide world of sports are you doing? Hey, I know you. You're Kurosaki from 1-3. Not many humans with hair that color, thank the gods. What you just do? Did you break that fence? Huh? Hey, what are you... Are you threatening me? You're headed for trouble, mister. Now hold on, son. Stop! Let's settle down and talk it over, okay? Wait! No! What the? He jumped from here to there? So, what's the big deal? Grab your pants? What the? What was that? Yahoo! Lunchtime! Here we go. It's only lunch, Orihime, not New Year's. Only lunch, Tatsuki. Lunch is the reason we girls come to school. Observe my eating lunch pose. Yeah, I get it. You can sit down now. What do you have today, Tatsuki? I've got a sweet bean paste and bread. Lucky for you. Lucky you. Unfortunately, mine's standard issue slop. I can make sweet bean paste. Really cool. How can Orihime eat like that and not get fat? I'm so jealous. Because she's a boobs machine. Orihime, can I eat with you? Yeah, sure. How cute. You've got food all over your face and you don't even care. That's the power cuteness. How can I help loving you? I'm hungry for more than food. Back off, Chizuru. It's broad daylight. Go eat by yourself in the girls' locker room or something. And don't corrupt Orihime, you libertine. Oh, shut up. Stay out of this. You've got a pretty face, but you're too butch for me. As if nobody asked you to like me instead of Orihime. What a waste. If you were a little more feminine, I'd take you on a field trip of amour, awakening you to the pleasures of... You sexist strumpet, I'll awaken you to pain! Huh? What is it? What's wrong, Orihime? Whoa! You're flashing the quad! I smell Ichigo. Smell? What are you, a bloodhound? This is the 3rd floor. Even if you could smell him, Ichigo couldn't come through the window. Is this 1-3's classroom? Ah! How'd you do that? How? You saw me. I jumped. No big deal. For me. Am I cool? Or am I cool? What the? He jumped to the 3rd story window? He must have climbed over from the next classroom. From the ground? Did you see him? No, I didn't actually see him. They're in awe of me. I'm a god, and they all know it. Wow. The girls in this class are total hotties. Not one dog among them. I was locked away for so long. I'm starving for female attention. I need a girl. Any girl. Ichiko. Heaven. I'm in heaven. He flew? Hello, lovely lady. Might I ask your name? That's it. Ichiko, you've lost your mind. That isn't funny. Get off of her. You're pretty cute up close. Uh-huh. Hey, wait. There's no hurry. Yes, there is. I've got damage control to do. I'm sure everything's fine. That hollow was easy too. We'll see. I've got a bad feeling. Hey, that's my classroom. On second thought, we should hurry. I told you. Die! Whoa, watch out! What is it? It was just a little peck. This isn't kindergarten. Shut up! Ah, Chizuru, do something. Me? Are you crazy? Do I look like Bruce Willis? Freeze. Ah! Cut him off, Ichigo. Gotcha. Now you're caught. No. What the? Wait. Stop, it's too high. That's my body you're totaling. Sheesh. Huh? He can run? What is he? Could he be? He has to be. He's a Mod Kanpaku. What was that? I think it was Rukia? Anyway, that is it for chapter 14 of Bleach School Days. Here we get a little bit of introduction to this mod soul, or as they've translated here, Mod Kanpaku, the defective soul that has taken over Ichigo's body and the havoc that it's raising. Clearly, into some cute girls. But we've got some things to analyze, some things to talk about here with this chapter, so let's get right into the analysis and response for the chapter, how I feel about it, what's going on, so on and so forth. So, chapter 14, School Days. We open where we left off with that box of defective souls, and here Jinx is giving Ururu a real hard time for it. So, again, we get the sense that Ururu is maybe not properly educated. Obviously doesn't know what defective soul. She's like, detective soul, right? Make a whole joke about her. Clearly Tessai's a little frustrated with the situation. We get more of that iteration of Tessai being the kind of disciplinarian for these two at the shop. And here we have him, he's pulling her, both of her long bangs, calling her a cockroach because of the, her design, right? She's got like these kind of antennae looking sort of deals. But Urahara, he's like, hey, stop fighting, it's my fault, right? Should have disposed of it. And I think that's kind of interesting stuff. We get this idea that that like he keeps these defective souls for whatever reason. He should have gotten rid of them. Which again, we talked about, the ethics of creating temporary souls in the first place, much less destroying them, right? Here Tessai expresses that Soul Society wouldn't be too happy if they found out, and that it'd be bad for their business. So that's kind of interesting, right? Is that like, I wonder if it's, maybe Soul Society gave them these things to dispose of, maybe, or alternatively, I wonder if he's getting these, like you have to wonder, is he getting this merchandise from some dealer that is less than reputable, or that he shouldn't have? And so, like, if this gets back to Soul Society, that people are dealing in these defective souls, um, that might be a problem too, right? So here we get a little bit of, and it wasn't the idea of punitive measurement really hasn't been brought up since chapter 1 from Soul Society, as we get these little glimpses in the world building. What I'm referring to is, like, Rukia mentioned in the first chapter that, like, she would kill Ichigo were she allowed to, or were like a public execution or whatever. She brings into execution being like, grounds for execution, right? Um, so it's clearly a society that executes people at the very least, and has these sorts of structures and rules to it. So, you know, maybe I wonder how serious a crime they would consider, you know, the distribution of these defective souls. I mean, you have to think that it's maybe not considered a crime to create these sorts of temporary souls and deal with them. It's just that these are the mod Konpaku, or the defective ones. I wonder if it's a defective mod Konpaku. So there's a lot there that kind of, just like that line, builds for us. Just the idea of Soul Society not being happy. We get a little bit more of their ethics, as well as maybe this relationship that Urahara and his shop has to Soul Society. To which, he expresses that they've got no choice. They've got to go out there and find and neutralize it before it causes any trouble, because they don't want this to get back to Soul Society, right? Here we get the, school days being, like you're in a daze, but also, like days, like school days, like, it's my days at school. It's a pun. It's a pun. Here, not used for an erotic game, but instead for, different usage. I mentioned that there's School Days is also an anime, notably. It's a harem show that's pretty infamous, but I do believe that one's actually spelled normally D-A-Y-S, D-A-Y-S, no E in there. Anyway, that's all aside. I think this is supposed to be just kind of evocative of the idea that, there's going to be some incident at the school, really. Usually I don't talk about the chapter titles. It's interesting to see how some of them connect. Anyway, I like that there's a lot subtly done to kind of illustrate this kind of spirit possessing Ichigo, and how that might be different. We see him limbering up, and I think in general, whenever the mod soul is inside of Ichigo's body, he's just generally more like, I don't know, like long limbed, drawn very anatomically, kind of tall and, not gangly, but like really long limb kind of situation. I think this is meant to be draw our attention to his physicality, as well as perhaps how quickly he can move. But yeah, here he's testing out his body, right? So he kicks this fence and does obviously quite a bit of damage, right? I think just between the shading, as well as the way that the eyes and the expressions are drawn, like, these are definitely ways that we haven't seen Ichigo before. So I think it's kind of interesting. We've been given 13 chapters to really kind of get used to Ichigo's own expressions and the way that he emotes and the way that he's depicted on page. And so with the same character design, just changing those expressions in subtle ways, does a whole lot. And I think this is, maybe not, I wouldn't call it necessarily Kubo flexing, but certainly feels like a good expression of how much, like, an artist can change a little thing, and it can change a lot about how a character comes across to us, right? We get again some pretty interesting world building, because we talked about Tim Souls before and like what it might be like, and here we get confirmation that, like, they're still conscious, at least of the fact that they're kind of imprisoned in that candy or in that little droplet, right? Whatever they're in beforehand. Um, we also get this line of bureaucrat pigs. So the idea of Soul Society being more of a bureaucracy, which we've had a little bit of that build up, obviously this is a society of strong laws. The Shinigami exist to deal with Soul Reapers, and they have a whole academy and institution built around it. Not Soul Society, yeah, the Soul Reapers exist to deal with Hollows, so on and so forth. So like there's clearly like a bureaucratic side to this afterlife that I think makes it an interesting sort of alternative to typically how people view afterlife structures. Though usually there's like a hierarchy of like angelic figures, right? Or whatever celestials that you might have. And so I think this takes that sort of hierarchical structure and is pushing it even further to like it being maybe more like an organizational structure, like a big business in Japan or something. Who knows? Like, right? These like a government. It's bureaucrats, right? So it's curious. We get these glimpses, and I think that's some neat stuff because we still we haven't seen Soul Society. We've just been on Earth. We haven't even seen like we've got a little bit of a glimpse of the gates of hell, right? And we know hollows come from this kind of liminal space or whatever between Soul Society and the mortal world. But yeah, this is neat that we get these glimpses and we get so much of this little tiny world building as we go, and I think that's really effective at us thinking about you know all these other characters because for most of the manga so far, our only point of reference to this larger world has been Rukia, really. She's been the person to kind of express a lot of everything that we might come to understand about the world beyond just the normal world that we live in, right? So, like, as we get more and more from like Rukia, like it's neat that now we've built this cast. Now we have Yurihara in his shop. Now we have this modified soul. And of course, the Hollows have provided a little bit of insight as well with what they've had to say. But yeah, it's neat that we're getting another point of like something supernatural, a supernatural character, a character that's from this other world, that's kind of in our own, and that helps us understand the larger world of this manga. And like I said, in a pretty organic way, right? So yeah, here this guy, yeah, not many humans. It's really weird. Uh, what a weird thing for a dude to say. Not many humans with that hair color, thank the gods. Like, what? Like, not many people was probably the better translation for that. Uh, it's weird. I feel like this is maybe more hyper literal translation than it is effective there, perhaps, because I can't imagine like a fucking because this guy's like a gym teacher. Like if he's got the kendo stick, he's got like the kind of gym thing. He's checking out the school grounds, right? This is I assumably like a teacher here at the school. He recognizes like Ichigo from being from this class, and he cares about him having broken the fence. So it's weird that he makes the distinction of not many humans with that color. Thank the gods. I mean, like there is this certain. This is kind of like more of a Japanese cultural thing, but there's a lot of kind of cultural push to kind of fit in and to look like other people. I mean, we got some of that before with like, hey, dye your hair black, right? I think this is more of that kind of reinforcing Ichigo's physical otherness, and that he doesn't fit in with society at large. Which again, a lot of kind of thematic work is done throughout Bleach to have Ichigo represent like kind of the individual versus society. I think that's the core conflict of Bleach. If you're talking about classical ways to depict conflicts, right? You have like, what man versus himself, man versus man, right? Man versus society, all of that. So, man versus the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those sort of typical like literary themes that you see played out in a lot of narratives. And Ichigo and certainly Bleach kind of is at the heart of that sort of the man versus society, or the individual versus society, right? Um, so we get these kind of reminders, and that's something that maybe could be lost on you if you're not aware of that cultural kind of thing of it's like, yeah, well, Japanese, we look this way. Japan's also incredibly like, there's this real push for like a homogenous sort of um, culture, as well as like way of presenting. So like there's they're very this is very isolated country, and there's like there could be a lot of xenophobia, especially for people who look different. Just looking different can usually get a lot of kind of different treatment. If you're interested in that, by the way, there's a great blog, Gaijin Smash, that's about this black guy teaching in Japan. Um, and he goes into a lot of like just like the way that he looks makes him feel like he has superpowers in Japan. It's good stuff. Anyway, that's enough on that and cultural stuff for here. Let's keep going on about the manga. Um, yeah, like Ichigo just approaching this guy has got him like, or well, the modded Ichigo has him really unnerved. I gotta imagine he's got this kind of unsettling expression as he's walking forward. And this guy's expecting that he's going to get his ass kicked. And, of course, we get a little bit more of that sort of carefree and spryness as he jumps over this fella's head, right? And not just straight over his head, but all the way over here to this little roofing bit. So we understand that this isn't something that Ichigo can normally do, as far as we know. I mean, we've seen him fight in his spiritual form, and certainly like be able to jump and fly around and all of that to an extent, but clearly this soul that's inside of Ichigo's body has imbued his body with kind of extra strength, right? And certainly in his legs, right? He's kicked that gate. He's done this big jump. So we're getting the sense that like this is this threat not just for being someone hijacking Ichigo's body and what socially that might ramifications that might have, but also this maybe being a physical threat as well. So the ante's been upped as he hops around. And then we hop back to the girls' classroom, right? Get Orihime being super excited about lunch again, kind of driving her like kind of carefree, very enthusiastic, maybe even childish demeanor. Tatsuki often gets played as sort of the straight man to Orihime's bubbliness. And of course, love her eating lunch pose, which is absolutely ridiculous. But we get a few good visual gags here. I mean, obviously between these few, and I love that she expresses, she's got such strange taste in food, but she's like, oh, I got sweet bean paste and bread, and she just has a whole damn loaf of bread. Like, it's very good stuff. Um, but we get the sense that Tatsuki and Orihime are pretty good friends, and even though Tatsuki gives her a hard time for some stuff, maybe again, like I said, before, to kind of perhaps reinforce that sort of standard socialization, fitting in. Tatsuki still is like, hey, look, I just got the standard slop, right? Um, there's of course reference of Orihime's breastage, as there always is from these other side characters. Here, the character who is definitively the lesbian character of Bleach. She gets named here as we learn Chizuru. Um, and I think also this serves not just as like kind of giving us this interaction between a lot of these characters so that we understand a little bit more of their personalities. We get a little bit of understanding of Tatsuki and Orihime, and Tatsuki's kind of protectiveness of Orihime in a lot of ways. But we also get like how Orihime deals with like flirtations and how Tatsuki deals with them, right? Uh, And yeah, Chizuru really getting right up in there. She's not subtle whatsoever. But yeah, that maybe makes Orihime a little uncomfortable, but she's not like she's kind of more overwhelmed than anything, whereas Tatsuki's the one to kind of strike back. I love, yeah, go eat by yourself in the girls' locker room, but don't corrupt Orihime. You libertine is a weird. Again, I think that's a weird translation bit. Strange. I wouldn't imagine any sort of high school person using that as an insult. I think they're just dancing around, calling her a lesbian. And then yeah, we get a lot of this kind of reiteration of Tatsuki not being feminine, and even though she's cute, uh, Chizuru, it's just not her type. And of course, that all of that, just thinking about that, tries Tatsuki up a wall. So we certainly get the idea that, like, yeah, Tatsuki is a little bit less feminine because she responds to these sorts of uncomfortable situations with violence, which is of course tragically a stereotypically masculine sort of stereotype, which is oof, stereotypes, right? But Orihime, otherwise her head is elsewhere. And then she's smelling Ichigo, which is pretty wild. Um, I can't imagine he has that distinctive a sense, but I think moreover this is Orihime kind of recognizing Ichigo's around. Maybe she has some sort of like connection to him that's more than just like I don't think it's so much as like scent as it is her really kind of just being kind of aware of his presence. So we get a little bit of a hint maybe that she's got like not I mean here it's framed as smell, but the way that I'm kind of reading it is more of like a supernatural sense of where he is, right? And we're maybe getting a little bit of that. So I think this is pretty effective because it's not only reminding us of these characters that we didn't get any Orihime or Tatsuki really in the previous chapter. I think they came up for maybe a panel or so. Um, but here we're getting a reminder of these characters and their connection to Ichigo, because it's kind of letting us know like, hey, these are going to be characters that are important moving forward, and they're this connection that they have is going to be important. Which of course this is a great time to bring it up because we have this mod soul that's running around in Ichigo's body, right? So it gives us a beat to kind of put us back into remembering these other characters. And maybe Kubo selling his female characters, building them up, and kind of celebrating their different aspects. Anyway, yeah, I love the you're flashing the quad. Um, Lots of this kind of comedic bits. And yeah, this I love. We didn't even expect it to be this anticipatory action again, but even if you could smell him, he couldn't come through the window, right? And here he is hopping all the way up to the third floor window, right? Um, yeah, I love the expressions on display here. Orihime more just enchanted and amazed, and Tatsuki absolutely terrified. But yeah, um, we get Mod Ichigo playing it cool, looking a bit, you know, full of himself. Although, yeah, I'm a god, and they all know it. So it's very, very, very much kind of a kind of enjoying his time in his new body, and then of course has this sort of arousal, this awakening back to like, oh yeah, I've been trapped forever. I haven't seen girls in a while, right? Um, yeah, she's not a dog among them. It certainly speaks towards the mod soul's kind of way that he sees other people and the sort of mentality that he has. So he's a bit of a perv, but we get much more confirmation as not only is he like, I need a girl, any girl, which is kind of pathetic, but we get a little bit more confirmation of him being a huge pervert whenever, of course, Orihime's breasts get brought up again, and he's saying that he's in heaven. Um, yeah, but he hops in close to do himself a big flirt. Uh, Kind of, I think in a lot of ways this is meant to mirror that earlier bit with Chizuru, right? Uh, and that's like this sort of insistent flirtation. I mean, it's even punctuated the same way with a little heart. Has the same sort of rose background, sort of art, right? Embellishment. I think of course, everybody freaking out because normally Ichigo is so aloof. Normally he's so kind of not doesn't pay a lot of attention to these women. Certainly not Orihime. Uh, it's more of a annoyance than anything else for him in a few ways. But yeah, of course, Tatsuki responds with like, "Hey, have you lost your mind? It's not funny. Get off of her." And then Mod Ichigo flips to flirting with Tatsuki, and of course, I love that freaks them out even more, right? Because maybe it's presumable that Ichigo might flirt with Orihime perhaps in a more private scenario, but not with Tatsuki. I also love that we get a little bit of this reversal here where, Orihime and Tatsuki were talking about Orihime's relationship with Ichigo, and, Orihime wants to take things a little bit further and connect with Ichigo and maybe start having a relationship with him. But whenever we get this Ichigo that's being incredibly forward, like literally jumping through the window and flirting with her, Tatsuki kind of like puts him in a headlock and is like, "Hey, that isn't funny," kind of giving him the out of like saying it was a joke or whatever, but also like that the way that she would prefer things is for Hime to have a little bit more agency whenever it comes to that. I don't know. Maybe she's just being protective. I mean, certainly is a far cry from what she was saying before, where she was just like, "Oh yeah, sexually assault him, throw him in the bushes and jump him." Uh, but is what it is. I like that. We hop back, so we jump from that kind of comedic moment, and then page turn back into Ichigo and Orihime, or not Ichigo and Orihime, Ichigo and Rukia running back across the school grounds and talking about there's like damage control to do, right? I like that they mentioned that the hollow is easy, so unfortunately, fifth hollow, right, gets taken care of off screen. But clearly Ichigo's progressed to a point enough that he can deal with a hollow off screen. So we're getting more of like it's a little minor beat, but we're getting more of this sense of Ichigo kind of having this progression as a capable main character. And yeah, they have a little bit of front, like here they're worried. Ichigo's worried initially, of course, about that reputation thing, but again we get this sense that there could be more danger as we see this shattered window. There's all this glass, and he's like, "Hey, that's my classroom, right?" And then, of course, the danger that we get is Tatsuki's throwing desk at him, and we get expressed that he had just given a little peck to I assume Orihime's hand, not to Tatsuki. Though if he had given her just a kiss on the cheek or whatever, I'm sure that would also merit this. But I think that peck is referring to Orihime's hand that he had kissed earlier. I love, begging Chizuru to do something about it. I don't know the line, "Do I look like Bruce Willis?" That's bizarre. I don't know if Bruce Willis often comes between lover spats. Do I look? What a. I mean, I imagine that. I can imagine that it being in the original Japanese. Kubo is into like a lot of different, Western media, so it fits. But it's another weird cultural reference that like kind of dates this similar to like Ewan McGregor, right? So we get these kind of celebrities, but I think that it also helps to inform that this is very much meant to be like Bleach takes place, at least as it was being written, same time our world, right? 2000, like early 2000s Earth, like not like fantasy world parallel, like Earth, right? which is kind of cool because a lot of shonen at the time weren't doing that. I mean, a lot of parallels get drawn between Ichigo and Yu Hakusho because they have quite a few parallels for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if Kubo was inspired by that work, but not a lot of shonen, especially a lot of the contemporary ones, take place in our world. In fact, not many at all. Period. Do there's always, if it isn't some other kind of fantasy Earth, then it's some isekai or whatever, right? So yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe that's one of the things that makes Bleach a little unique and draws people to it is that it imagines this kind of more serious sort of interesting take, this world underneath our own, and I think that kind of makes it exciting. But yeah, immediately we get the mod soul kind of maybe even if not recognizing Rukia, but like recognizing that she is a threat, right? And then he makes a break for the window, and here we get Spirit Ichigo hopping into the window, right? I guess they're gonna have to erase everyone's memories with Rukia yelling out to cut him off, and with this encounter happening in front of everybody. But here, yeah, he still goes for it. He still jumps past Ichigo through the window, and Ichigo's like, "Hey, that's my body," but he sticks this landing, and then just takes off, right? And even though these panels both show Ichigo's face, it's pretty easy to tell the distinction between which Ichigo is which, right? Just again based on expression alone. So we can see like this is clearly our Ichigo reacting, and I mean we get a little bit of the glass shatter there to help inform that. And then down here we get the other Ichigo who's got a very determined expression as he takes off, right? Um, and yeah, here Rukia has the realization that he is a mod Kanpaku, and so that's kind of an interesting place to end it on. That he's like this modified sort of soul. I think what we're supposed to take from that is that like he's not just the regular sort of Kanpaku or whatever it is, Ganpon, whatever. Not the normal soul that they would normally use to kind of put into these bodies, but he's a modified one. So that probably explains why he has these kind of superhuman abilities that he wouldn't need to have if he was just being used for those other reasons. But I think the takeaway that we're meant to take here is that like not only is she connecting that because of all of these kind of abilities, because he can jump from a third story window and survive it, right? Which assumably normally Ichigo would not be able to do in his human body. But I think more than that, I think we're supposed to interpret it that like this is a dangerous thing because he's been modified, and so there could be, obviously he doesn't have the ideal personality. Obviously, there's some other things going on with him, and so there's like this kind of danger about him being. Obviously, it wasn't what they expected, but even more so that he's been modified in these different ways. So again, we're getting more of that sort of manipulation of souls to a certain end. That sort of danger and all that. It's curious. It's interesting. Kind of building on what we started in the previous arc, and we're getting a little bit more of this character, this Mod Kanpaku, who is, of course, our antagonist for this little arc. But yeah, let's go back and let's go through the chapter. Let's talk about moments of foreshadowing. I mean, they kind of talk finally like I've been doing a lot of analysis for these analysis and response bits. I try to weave my response through it, but response wise, I think this is a solid chapter. I really do. I don't think we've had like a bad chapter yet with Bleach, which is early Bleach is great stuff. But I think this one maybe isn't as exciting as the previous because obviously the last one we were transitioning all of this, we had this really effective setup. I don't think that the where we end here is maybe as dramatic. I mean, it's certainly a new sort of revelation, which is interesting, but again, whenever I talk about Bleach being written for like the collected format, it's stuff like that we have these sort of chapters that can really focus on like kind of building the arcs into interesting ways without having to end on some huge startling revelation to make you want to read next week, right? You can have more subtle and more regular developments. You don't need to end a chapter on something like super dramatic, which is, that's always the kind of thing that you have to deal with weekly series, is how much it's written for the weekly publication versus how much it takes being a collected work into consideration. But yeah, I like this chapter. I think it does a lot, as we saw, to kind of build the world, as well as remind us of these character relationships, kind of build them a little bit more, um, you know, all of that stuff. Sexualize Orihime, of course, because of course, you know, eh, it's maybe a little gross, but that's just how a manga do. Remember, this is written for teenage boys. It's a target demo. Young teenage boys, I will say. So big boobs, right? That's how you sell a character, maybe. Make them kawaii. Ugh. It's weird to think about, but it's also, I think to an extent, Kubo is also kind of playing with a lot of those sorts of tropes, and maybe trying to use, like I said before, familiar structures in a different way. So this whole idea of Orihime being like this kind of uh, the most sexually kind of, I guess I say sexually sexualized sort of character, whenever she's got a much more sort of innocence and charming personality. That's certainly meant to kind of juxtaposition one to the other, right? That she's not willing to leverage her sexuality in the ways that Tatsuki presents in that other chapter. So it's interesting. Like, yeah, it's super skeevy. The more that it gets called attention to, that they're talking about huge boobs and all this stuff, but also they're teenagers in high school. Like, of course they're going to be talking about Orihime's tits. Whatever. So yeah, I try to like not be too like you know hey, that's super weird about it, because narratively it is like, okay, hey, you're taking time to talk about your own character's tits. This isn't like an erotic manga, but I think to an extent it has its place. You know, it doesn't ever become overwhelmingly the focus of a chapter. So I appreciate like kind of what's being done, but I think it could have been handled maybe in a more effective or less overblown way. But a lot of the time, stuff like that gets also played for gags, and they do love their gags. So, whew. Anyway, let's get into the talking about how this connects. Right, spoilers, obviously. If you're not looking for spoilers, get. But we'll talk about how this connects to Bleach at large, and talk about some of the foreshadowing and other things going on here. So, again, we were talking about defective souls before, and how that, kind of is emblematic of Urahara in general and the entire manga. I don't know if the Ururu cockroach stuff has much of anything to do. I don't know. I don't know if I can draw any connections there. I don't know what's going on with her design. If somebody has some insight there, go ahead and let me know. Like, um, but yeah, interesting. We do get like this whole thing of like Urahara should have disposed of it. And it's like, yeah, like you should have disposed of the Higekyo, you fucking like you monster. Like we get a lot of Urahara, like, as even though he says these things to save face, and we have him maybe running ill of Soul Society through his action or inaction or whatever it is. So we get again a lot of these structures that would define Urahara, right? That he has Tessai kind of supporting him, but taking a backseat to Urahara making decisions, and kind of doing what he can to not run afoul of Soul Society. And so here we get kind of a pretty good moment of him kind of saying like, look, we don't have a choice. We have to go and neutralize it before it causes trouble. I should have taken care of this before. But at the very least, he was also kind of interested in what, like this is clearly something he was interested in. He had it inside of his own shop, right? So, we get that sense of all of that, and I mean, we'd see this played out again in the turn back to Pendulum, right, where Urahara decided to go out with Tessai to go neutralize it before it caused trouble, right? So there's a good bit of that. We get a lot of these little things kind of going on. A lot of this idea of Urahara trying to kind of cover up things that he's doing. He's not really doing stuff that maybe is permissible or is seen as good. So there's a darkness there, at least like sort of machinations, and him trying to take care of things before anyone else realizes it. Him pulling these strings in a way, right? But more than that, you know, the takeaway here is that Urahara is not doing this to like create chaos or to cause, like we don't know what his goals are here, but the idea being that like at the end of the day, he doesn't want to cause like issues, right, for social society or his business or whatever. So even though he's operating in these kind of darker circles, he's still willing to, you know, go there and handle things firsthand before it becomes an issue for other people. So he still values that sort of that sort of non-troublemaking thing, right? That sort of status quo, that sort of everything going as it should go, and him not causing trouble, being able to manipulate things behind the scenes and kind of keep things from becoming an issue while still involved in maybe some of these less than ideal kind of interactions. Yeah, we get more of Khan just having a good time in Ichigo's body. We don't really get Khan as a malicious force later than this, but I think the idea that it establishes him as a credible threat maybe is important, or a credible, even just kind of credible character to maybe even fight alongside Ichigo, which that's also something that we don't really see. As cool as it would be to have, it's hard to imagine after early Bleach to have like Khan and Ichigo fighting the Hollows together, right? Yeah, bureaucrat pigs keeping him imprisoned is, again, I mean, we talked about mod soul relation to soul society, and here we have confirmation of like these are very conscious souls, and I don't know if it's just the mod souls or if it's all of the souls made, right? The temporary souls, but certainly as a mod soul, he's conscious, and he's uh, justifiably frustrated with like the bureaucrats, right? The people that consider him not to even be a person. So that's kind of cool. Um, and I love that here we've got uh, Khan kind of immediately having this line where he's like, "Ugh, those bureaucrats keep me imprisoned all this time," which Soul Society would keep another character imprisoned pretty soon, right? But immediately as he's starting to kind of rail against Soul Society with this character who is unsurprisingly dressed in a black getup with a sword, obviously, clearly not like a Soul Reaper or anything, but maybe meant to be evocative of that to a degree. Um, and uh, we have Khan just stun on him and then make fun of him, right? Anyway, yeah, we get a lot more of those character bits. I don't know that any of this really does much to connect to like larger kind of things other than establishing more of those characters. Obviously, Tatsuki being really protective of Orihime would come up again whenever Orihime gets her fight against the. I don't remember the entire name for that hollow, but I think Chandelier is part of it. Um, but the tentacle hollow that Orihime develops her powers against, we get a little bit of that protecting us from Tatsuki. Um, we get our first overt homosexuality in Bleach. There'd be a lot more homosexuality to come, but you know, first bit of overt sexuality from a female character to another one. Um, yeah, I definitely think this is Orihime developing like kind of a spiritual sense for Ichigo. I don't think it's literally her spelling him, but that like she can sense Ichigo showing up, and I wonder if even because she goes to the window, I wonder how much of that is Ichigo physically versus her sensing Ichigo because his spirit's also coming back to the school. He's like rushing back because whenever Ichigo gets back here as a spirit, like it's right after the window's been shattered. Um, Interestingly, that the window is shattered where here it's shown as open and she's stepping out into it. So I don't know. Weird. Maybe this window shattered because Tatsuki threw a fucking chair through it. Who knows? Because clearly it's just an open window right here. See you, Kubo, retconning your manga while you're writing it. Um, yeah, let's see. Boo, 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 boo. Yeah, this is the fourth window over, right? Gets shattered. He is on. It's hard to tell, actually. Yeah, it's hard to tell which window it is, or if that's even the one that broke. You know, because clearly she's lifting and throwing this at the window where he's at. So I imagine that but then she's got another desk that she's slamming too. So it's hard to tell. Um, and here it's not really a broken window either. So curious if the broken window gets used there. Whenever we don't ever see a window break. In fact, it just seems like an open window the entire time. But whatever. Yeah, I can talk about that some other time. I like that they kind of pin Ichigo between Rukia in the doorway and Ichigo in the window to catch him. I think that's like again building that like they're building more of the strategy, kind of good team building moment between them. Um, yeah, yeah. And then of course the mention that he's a mod Kanpaku, which as we've come to learn, that there were different souls like these temp souls that were modified to be more actual battle capable, and the entire project got scrapped. And I also believe that's the idea, right? The Khan's name comes from Kanpaku, so it's just a shortening of that. Um, but yeah, not a lot of other bigger connections kind of going on in this chapter. Not a lot else to say. If you see stuff there that you think you want to kind of talk about, feel free to let me know in the comments as always. But yeah, I like that everybody's thrown for a loop and it's like, I think there's Rukia. Clearly wouldn't be aware of Ichigo in the window because he's soul, spirit, whatever. But yeah, that's chapter 14 of Bleach. I don't have much else to say about it. Like I said, kind of just building the action and building the info that we get. I believe the next chapter will get more info on Mod Souls or the Mod Kanpaku, and I think this wraps up pretty quickly. So we'll see. We'll see how much longer we roll through this chapter. But I think the ultimate point of all of this, really, like, because you think about like the takeaways, right? It's like Khan doesn't end up being like a huge major character in Bleach. It ends up being like, yeah, it approaches and handles the sort of quote unquote plot hole of like Ichigo's body just being a limp corpse more or less the entire time he's doing all this Soul Society stuff, especially whenever he leaves for a while. It's like, well, Khan's got to pretend to be him for an extended period of time, right? But I think more than all of that, so like that certainly need to be addressed to a degree. But I think more than that, this is meant to be really an arc that establishes two really important things outside of just making Khan as a character, which, as we know, Khan unfortunately doesn't end up being a very major character. That said, this arc helps to establish Urahara's shop, Urahara's connection to modified souls and Soul Society. It sets up a lot of Soul Society's ethics as far as they deal with these things and these souls. So I think that's really what's more at the heart of this arc than just like, oh, it's Khan's arc, I shouldn't really care about it. Khan's not that big of a character, right? Um, there's more going on there that I think is significant and that like the arc's really trying to drive at. And I think it hides it all in being, because we've had these character focused arcs, the last two big ones, right? We have Orihime's arc and then we have Chad's arc, and so we think, oh, okay, well our next arc's going to be another. It's going to follow those structures, right? We talk about those sorts of structures and how Kubo kind of is using the same structure over and over. And now instead of a hollow attack on a friend that develops into a thing, we get this other character introduced, and it's easy at the very end of this to think, oh, that's been another character arc, that was just another thing to establish this new character and to kind of bring them a little bit closer to Ichigo and all that. But it really is secretly not that. It's actually, more than especially the other two, which had plenty of world building in them, don't get me wrong. This, I think, is much more a vessel of establishing Urahara as a character. And, because obviously this is where he gets introduced, but also of like building up those sorts of world building things. So I think it's sneaky on Kubo's part to a degree, right? It's really clever writing, because I think for the person that's not, if you're not aware of it, if you're just reading this for the first time, it's easy to kind of overlook those things and be focused on this character-driven narrative instead, right? We have Khan, he's doing all this other stuff. That's the interesting part, and not think about the implications of what's happening with Urahara and with his shop and with Soul Society. But that's all groundwork that's being laid there that's incredibly important to the rest of Bleach, right? So that's, whenever I talk about, like, I think Kubo writes a really good manga, and I think that this manga is pretty well written compared to other manga, it's because he's using narrative inversions like that, right? It's not a high, defied your expectations, and that novelty alone is enough to make this important. It's, I built these structures, and then I'm intentionally using these structures to do different things than what you expect. And those sorts of inversions are meaningful, right? So that you can have this kind of build up into these greater reveals without it being like actually subtle, narratively subtle. So it's cool stuff. I really appreciate this chapter for that. Anyway, that's that's about the most I have to say about the chapter, and spoilers and how it connects, really, though. So, yeah, thanks for joining me for another one of Bleach Revisited. This has been Karakura Gold. As always, spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.